time to plan for things. You're responding to things quite literally within hours or the next day. So that's something you have to kind of be more agile in doing that. And I had some really good advice from a mentor who said, make quick decisions, but take some time just to think about any unintended consequences of the good actions that you're planning on taking. And I guess the other thing that I would say, and you probably experienced this in your work, we've had to become a lot more comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Mm.
We're dealing with very, very challenging situations. And I know Sangi might pick up on this when she speaks, but the arts and the sports sector have dealt with significant stories over the last 12 months around racism, sexism, ableism, etc. And how do you kind of lead with credibility and authenticity as you navigate some of those challenges and try to make change? So I think that's what a typical day week looks, and I've just kind of learned to expect the unexpected in my work, and just take it one day at a time.
Absolutely are, but there's so much to unpick there, and you've articulated it so well in terms of actually it's the firefighting, absolutely being very strategic in what the objective is. What, how do we create these conditions of belonging whilst remote working? And then obviously you've had the added challenge within the creative industry of closures, like the physical closure of space. But yet it doesn't mean to say that the need doesn't exist. If anything, how do we adapt in this new way of working? And yes, absolutely, the travel is something I don't miss at all. I think the companies have recognized how much they're saving on expenses as well, right? So it kind of works in our favor. So that's all good. But just to unlock something you mentioned, Abid, about yes, the pandemic has disproportionately impacted certain marginalized and underrepresented groups. Keeping in mind, we're very much here connecting, talking about the South Asian community and the impact um, or the challenges or, the barriers or the opportunities and celebrations of South Asian community. What would you say from your experience, Abid, is what are the main challenges and opportunities for the South Asian artist?
It's a really big question, and I
It's a
think
loaded question, I'm sorry.
and there's so many layers to that. I think um, just reflecting on my own experience of working in the arts and cultural sector, I think there's generational challenges. So for many South Asian communities, um, our parents migrated to build a better life here in the UK. So for many people, certainly, so I come from a British Pakistan. I'm of British Pakistani heritage. I guess when my parents moved to the UK, they moved as economic migrants. They wanted to build a better life for their families, both the people that they left behind and the families that they started here in the UK. So I grew up in Sparkbrook and Small Heath. They're both kind of working class communities. And parents, I guess parents of my parents' generation, they wanted the best for their kids. So they wanted doctors, lawyers, accountants, etc. My feeling is our parents' generation have developed enough engineers, lawyers, and accountants. Um, our generation of parents now have to develop artists, policymakers, activists, etc. So I think a lot of people growing up, they might have had creative talent, but they probably weren't encouraged to pursue that challenge. Uh, I think it would be wrong for us not to address the elephant in the room, that actually sometimes there can be gender stereotypes. So I grew up in a family where there's four brothers and one sister, but I have three daughters. I want my daughters to have a very different experience, I guess, to my sister and my mum. So I want them to grow up and uh, be whatever they want to be. But one story I share with arts leaders is my daughter's names are Mariam, Aisha, and Anisa. And when I take them to see theatre in England, it's very, very rare for them to see a character on stage with those names. So how do I inspire my daughters to engage with the arts when the very work that they go and see doesn't feature them or their stories? I think many of us have probably been in the same situation. If we travel to London on a day trip and the kids go running into the gift shop and they see all the kind of personalized gifts, but they never see their names. So I think there's something there around the power of storytelling. Certainly from a Muslim perspective, I think some of our female artists have faced bigger barriers, particularly if they want to follow a career in music, for example, or dance, because sometimes there can be religious and cultural reasons that people may feel they can't engage with things. Um, Something which is really positive, I think we're seeing more role models. So we're seeing some amazing South Asian artists across different fields. And my kids' generation have role models that we didn't have. And I remember growing up, if we saw someone who looked ethnically diverse on TV, we'd call everybody into the room and say, hey, there's somebody on TV. And Riz Ahmed has talked about that in terms of the Riz test. So I think representation is increasing. One of my challenges and provocations to South Asian communities would be it's not just about creative roles, it's also about leadership roles. So you could become policy makers, you can work at funding agencies, you could become executive directors, because some of those people can actually have a big influence in terms of the kind of work that's done. And I think historically, the South Asian community has been brilliant in terms of engaging as school governors, but there's more opportunities for people to join the boards of our arts and cultural organisations. So in Birmingham, you could join the board of Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery, the Icon Gallery, etc. And that's where we need voice. And the last thing I would kind of mention, Sophia, and it's interesting because we've got some visual artists on the call here. One of the challenges is how do you navigate the kind of challenge between classical and contemporary practice? So a lot of contemporary art galleries in the UK might have a particular creative focus, and how do we navigate that for many artists from South Asian backgrounds that follow very classical, traditional art forms, whether they're of Indian, Pakistani, or Bangladeshi heritage. So sometimes an exceptionally talented artist may not get the opportunities to showcase their work because there might be a disconnect between the vision of the organization and the creative practice. And that shouldn't take away from the quality of the work, but it's just recognizing that some of those barriers exist. But that's part of the role of a policymaker. How do you kind of become aware of those issues, navigate those, and kind of create the policy conditions? Because organizations like the Arts Council have the agency through our funding role and our advocacy role to make a difference and kind of say to organizations, how do you become more relevant and representative of communities that have been historically underserved?
No, that's very true, Abid, and I think I love what you said about. I think a lot of my work is in the area of how do we give a voice, or how do we keep where decisions are being made, where there is a power, you know, how do we show that there is representation from the underrepresented groups? So actually, it's the decisions that are being made that benefit everyone and not just certain majority groups, which has been historically true. And until we continue as the South Asian community to dismiss ourselves from those rooms and those spaces, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to change the story at the pace we would like. And I think our younger generation coming through, they're more likely. I think you talked about your children and why representation is so important to them. I'd like to say that our roles, Abid, in the coming generations won't exist because our children would be demanding that equity is something that is a given right of theirs. I know on a broader world issue that there are so many different challenges we're facing, but as a civilized Western country, I think we should be able to make progress at a much faster pace. So yes, decisions, wherever there is a decision being made, let's have representation from all groups, be it women, be it South Asian underrepresented groups, or be it from any community. So thank you for that. I think there's a lot to take away, and I think you've given some great guidance from an artist's point of view as well to say how do we bridge that gap between what is seemed acceptable contemporary versus traditional, and how do we create access to these opportunities for artists. So thank you for that. I guess one final question I have for you is, and it wouldn't be right for me not to ask this because obviously you've got people who are listening in live, but also there will be the recordings will be shared, and we often find people view the recordings more than they join the live event. Abid, is whilst we have you here, is what is the advice you would give to someone wanting to work in arts and cultural sector?
Yeah, I mean, I would say believe in yourself. It's a really important starting point, and recognize the importance of your voice. I think what you just said about the power of storytelling is incredibly powerful. And I think it's important for young people or anybody who's kind of pursuing a career in arts in later life to recognize the importance of the power of arts and creative practice, because it's a way of bringing communities together. It's about sharing our stories, and that's something that is incredibly powerful in terms of how we can bring people together. I would say to anybody wanting to pursue a career in the arts, have patience. Sometimes your best ideas you can't do in your first project, because you have to build that agency, profile, autonomy, and relationships. Uh, be prepared for knockbacks, but that shouldn't be a reflection on the quality of your work. It just could be that actually a gallery is particularly prioritizing one type of work in a particular season. I think it's really important to invest in your own personal and professional development. And I think that's something that I think for a lot of artists of South Asian heritage becomes sometimes a bigger issue. I think it's going to become less of an issue in the future. But if you wanted to be a musician and you ended up doing an engineering degree, you might not have had the opportunity to invest in your talent development in the way that you normally would have. So I think it's just recognizing that a lot of the best South Asian creatives I know kind of went up a couple of cul-de-sacs and then they came back into the arts. And I shared a bit of my reflection in terms of going from the gas industry to the arts sector. Um, but I think that's really important, and I think it's also about retaining your authenticity, which I think is really important, and recognizing that you don't have to put your work into a particular stereotype. So it's absolutely fine for an artist of South Asian heritage um, to create work or write stories that might have nothing to do with their cultural identity. And for me, I think that's a real opportunity, because I think too often South Asian artists might only get an opportunity if they're talking about their particular lived experience. So just kind of get yourself out of that box. Don't conform to stereotypes, and um, apply for funding and support. There's plenty of that around, and the Arts Council is somewhere where you can come in for funding. And I'll put a link to our website and some of our funding programs in the chat window. But that's what my advice would be,
Oh,
Sophia.
there's plenty. There's great advice there. Thank you so much. I wish I'd connected with you 20 years ago and I had this advice, right? But it's never too late. So thank you, Abid. I'm sure there'll be questions coming up from the audience as we go along.
Can
Um,
I just take this opportunity actually to thank Abid and the Arts Council personally, because during lockdown, it has really benefited me as an artist of the developing your own creative practice funding that came out. So I'd like to say a big thank you to you, people like yourself, Abid, and the Arts Council for doing that opportunity for us.
there you go. You've got a live case study amongst us. So how amazing. Thank you, Sam. And thank you, Abid, once again. And with that said, I will now pass it over to Sadia.
Thank you, Abid. That was extremely insightful and inspiring. Art truly is a platform where people can access a different viewpoint. And there is underrepresentation, but from hearing what you both have said, it just seems that it may be, a thing of a past, for the future generation, and we look forward to that time, really. That said, a very warm welcome to Sangy, and thank you for joining our panel today. Sangy, you're an advocate of female participation and inclusivity in sport, particularly cricket. Tell us a bit about your journey into the world of cricket, coaching, and what influenced you to take steps, particularly in empowering girls and women.
Well, firstly, thanks for having me here today. And I've got a limited amount of time, so I'll try and be as condensed as I can. I sort of see myself, so I sort of see a pre-Sangy and a post-Sangy in some ways, because I got into cricket with, I was always a spare in my dad's team. And it was always a case of Sangy pad up, you know, so-and-so's not playing today, or there's a space for you in the team. And it was like, great. And I always wanted to get into sport, and actually I would have loved to have taken it up professionally. But again, I think Abid made this sort of reference. I'm from a Sri Lankan heritage, and it got to a certain age where it's like, right, you need to stop sport now, you need to study, and you need to think about what kind of career to go down. So I guess I never really carried on with the sport, which is quite sad, because even from a participation element, I think sometimes, especially South Asian families, I think we have this pretext in our head that if you're playing tennis, it means Wimbledon. If you're playing football, it means St. George's Park. If it's cricket, it's Lords. You have to go all the way up, and it's not necessarily the case. You can have participation for fun. So sadly, I did stop playing at about 15 or 16. And I think there were other reasons as well, and not only just sort of GCSE age. I think it was getting to a point where, do you know, watch a young girl run with lots of men, boys. I think it's not appropriate anymore, and I think that's one of the reasons why it kind of fizzled out. Having said that, I did go back and play cricket in a local team when I just finished university. That was local to me in Harrow, and then I stopped cricket then because I met my other half. We got married, had children, and that was it. I became a mum. So this is where I guess my journey, when I say I'm a pre-Sangy and post-Sangy, just after having my children, my perceptions were my sporting days were over. I've played hockey, I've played cricket. Now it's all about taking my kids to their classes here and there. So it happened to be that my son's cricket club was hosting a women's softball event, because this is back in 2017 when the Women's World Cup was on. And funny enough, I was just sitting underneath the tee, because I'd taken him for his game, sipping my tea, and my husband came along and said, no, I used to play cricket. Why don't you give it a go? So put the trainers in front of my face, and I clearly said to him, look, my days are done. I don't do sport anymore. It's all about the kids now. But I went on there, played a little bit of softball cricket, and I fell back in love with the game. And I thought, wow, actually, I want to come back here, and I want to come back and carry on playing cricket. But it's only when I looked around and I noticed there were two girls playing amongst hundreds of boys still. And I thought, actually, the culture of cricket hasn't changed. It's still girls tagged along with the boys. And that's when I just sort of decided that, yes, I'll start something in the club there, which is the background I'm in at the moment. This is my club at Harrow. And I thought, let me start something for women and girls. And that's where my journey sort of begun. And I guess from a coaching perspective, my background is pretty much in business. But when I wanted to start up this women and girls platform at our club, I noticed it was just me sitting in a room with about 16 other blokes kind of saying, that's really great what you want to do. Well done. Congratulations. Keep up. And I thought, well, hang on a second. We're planning for girls' cricket sessions, planning for women's, yet there's no female coach. Where are we going to get a female coach from? So I managed to employ one female coach, but then I decided, right, okay, well, I'm going to give it a go. I know about the game, but why don't I learn to coach as well? And that's when I got into coaching. And like I said, I've headed up this women and girls section since 2017. So from going from 2 girls playing with hundreds of boys, we've got our own dedicated women and girls section. And on a Saturday morning, there's over 70 females on there. It's incredibly busy, and it's still growing. And that's my journey so far, just from a cricket perspective, from what I do outside of work.
Sangy, that's amazing, how you sort of like came so far from where you started, just 2 girls amongst, a horde of boys. And, now you have, headed your own sort of like girls side and section as well. And I think this story would probably, be very familiar to many, because as in our culture, I guess sports was never perceived as a conceivable career for girls. They would send them to university, higher education. But I think things are probably changing. Would you say so now?
Yeah, yes, definitely changing. And I guess we also need to open our eyes up a little bit, because a career in sport doesn't necessarily mean playing for England cricket team or playing for England as such. There's other things. You can work in marketing, you can work in as physio. There's lots of different strands, like myself. So I work in the participation and growth team, which is pretty much project team. Yes, you could probably say that it's got a kind of business focused, isn't it? Really, it's about growing the game, but it's still within the sports sector. So there is scope for people to actually take up these jobs. And I suppose it's not just for South Asians only. I guess a lot of people do, as soon as they think of sport, they think, right, playing for England or playing for the elite teams. And sometimes they just don't see beyond that, really. But it's definitely growing.
No, that's amazing. What barriers, Sangy, have you in your journey noticed that women come across, particularly the South Asian women, they sort of face when it comes to playing sport?
I'd probably say maybe the support from a family. So, for example, you may have a typical married woman with a husband, and sometimes it's their own barriers that are preventing them from getting involved. So, for example, even with my club, when I ask ladies to get involved, and not necessarily playing, just getting involved with the setup in itself, you'll get responses such as, my husband knows more about cricket than I do. I don't really know much about cricket. My son plays cricket, or no, I'm busy with the house, and all that kind of thing. So I guess sometimes, like myself, I put that hat on just before I was meant to play that softball game, and said, well, my time is over. It's all about the kids. So I think sometimes mothers, we put our mindset that actually the priority and fun and engagement is actually just for the children, whereas we've got a responsibility now, which means it doesn't include fun. So I guess there's that barrier as a mother. I guess there are some cultural barriers. So if I talk about South Asians in particular, so for example, some South Asian women don't like to participate in front of men for many reasons. It could be cultural, or it could be that they feel intimidated. And I guess this is where our program's slightly different at work. So we allow these ladies to step up to be volunteers and become the local role model in an environment where they feel comfortable. So for example, if they want to run some of the junior programs in the mosque, they can do it. And if they need to go in a basement where there's no windows and we stipulate no males around, then we'll stipulate that. So I guess those are it's what they've seen so far, where they think actually it's not my environment, or it's not where I can be myself. So a mother's thing is always going to be a case of prioritizing their own children first. And then from a cultural perspective, it may be that actually that environment just isn't right, or it's just not for me at all. I guess another third one as well, when people say sport, they think, oh, really don't want to overexert myself there and push myself. So there is a bit of a fitness element along with that as well.
So Sangy, tell us that, do you think there are enough role models now in sports, so like at every level, coaching or, even players?
On a short answer, I'd say no. We're getting there. So I guess this is a program I work at. And if anyone wants to see it, you can have a look at the website. It's ecb.co.uk/dream big. It's about encouraging ladies from a local community to step up and become an activator to run our junior programs. And we train these ladies up. And we'll do it in an all-female environment only. If we need to take it to them, so for example, if they want training in the local mosque or local temple, rather than going to a sports area, we'll take the training to them. So we're trying to break as many barriers so they can get included. So from a grassroots level, that's going up, especially with a program like ours. I can only speak for cricket at the moment. From a coaching perspective, obviously these ladies are the ones that will then step up to become coaches, and you're getting there slowly. You are getting there where it is kind of feeding in. And if you take me as an example, 2017, I was just a businesswoman with my children. Now I am a level 2 coach. I'm hoping to step up myself a little bit further. and there aren't as many maybe in the coaching level, say for example at the elite level, but again, if we work on that grassroots, that's where it can kind of filter upwards, really. So there is a lot of work being done in cricket. And I guess in the board, for example, in cricket board, there is one South Asian female that chairs. She's the first South Asian female to chair a first-class cricket county, which is Mahmuda Duke, and she chairs Leicestershire County. There's now another South Asian lady that's come on board to Derbyshire Cricket as a non-executive director, Mani Sambu. So she stepped up, and I believe is also Parveen Malik. She's also stepped up as a non-executive director for Yorkshire Cricket Board. So slowly these positions, South Asian women are stepping up and going into these positions. It's just about creating awareness, and I guess I advocate massively for you can't be what you can't see. So if they're not there, they're not going to be those role models. But I would say from a cricket perspective, it's definitely getting there.
Definitely, from what you've just told us, it seems to me that things are changing, and you're doing everything to encourage young girls and women to even sort of like moms to kind of like participate at every level. And it just seems to me that things are going in the right direction. So bearing that in mind, how important do you think it is for men to be engaged in encouraging women to take up sport? What role can they play?
Well, I think I talked about two men in my life already. So my father, that was the one that sort of encouraged me to play, but sort of said, no, you need to stop and study now. I think my mum was giving a bit of lip service in those days as well. But I think it would have been nice if he'd sort of advocated and pushed a little bit more if that was something I wanted to carry on and do professionally. But again, Abid, I think you mentioned this, it's a generational mindset that actually to be successful, you wouldn't have been able to have a career. So I always feel that I understand where my parents were coming from and that sort of perspective. But then again, what I'm doing now to kind of advocate for more females and do the job I do, I couldn't do half of what I do if I didn't have the support of my husband. So my husband's always behind me. If it's looking after kids or doing late night meetings or whatever it is. And actually, sometimes he pushes me into certain things like, you know what, you should really take this opportunity, go for it. So sometimes it's nice to have that male ally. And I would say why for male ally? Because women as women are generically say, we don't tend to self-compliment ourselves or sometimes have a self-confidence. So for example, if there is a non-executive director level role going, it could be, where a woman might say, well, actually, I can only do 3 things of 5. I'm not going to apply. Whereas I think with a man, if it was 3 things of 5, they would just apply for that role anyway. So if you do have male encouragement that says, no, do you know what, carry on, go and do it. It's nice to have that support. But in particular with sport, dads encouraging their daughters, it's nice to have family support, whether it's a mum or a dad, but especially with the dad. And I think with South Asians in particular, it's sometimes with girls, I can almost see them sometimes, they turn around. I've seen some of my girls, they sometimes turn around and look at their dad for a little bit of validation of, am I doing the right thing or am I okay here? And sometimes it's just nice for a dad to sort of say, you're doing great, carry on. And especially now I've seen a role reversal and change, because before, it's interesting, a couple of years ago, I had a girl who's in her under 11 match, and her 8-year-old brother was having training that day. And the father said to me, I can't take her for the match because her brother's got training. But then we kind of put it into perspective. It's like, well, she's got a game and the boy's just training. He can always, I know logistics is hard when you have 2 children, but she's got an actual game. Why don't you support that? And he brought her to a game, and actually after that, things have changed a little bit. So you tend to see the girl coming for training more, for matches more, because they've actually stopped training the boy because they've actually now prioritized the girl. Because before the priority was actually we need to take the boy versus the girl. But now we're seeing little things like that kind of change. So yeah, absolutely massive to have male allies. And again, some of the ladies that have taken on the program that we run at the ECB, some of the husbands that have really encouraged their women to kind of get involved. It's good for them, really. And it's a community-wide, they're doing a piece of work that's not just impacting their family, this impacts a generation. And it could be that the children that they're coaching, they're not just females, they're not just girls, they're also males. So by advocating that, and the women running these programs, you're putting things into the mindset of a little boy that actually it's good to have female coaches as well. They don't have to be male. So it's a generational impact this work really is having.
Yeah, absolutely, you're right. I mean, I suppose, within women, there's always been an interest, regarding the sport. You'll get lots of women spectators, at home, women are interested in watching matches. But, to actually go out there and play, I guess it's all about awareness and education, and, people like yourself who reach out and sort of like make things happen. So definitely it's very laudable. Sangy, what important transferable skills do you think cricket can teach girls?
I could be here all day, really, but so sometimes I say to girls, decision-making skills is a big one, really. So I tend to rotate with girls and make everyone be a captain one day. So they'll say, who do I need to put the ball? I was like, I'm not playing, it's your decision. You decide, what do you think you should do? And it's interesting because girls will always think a lot. I think children generally do anyway, but I want the girls to have a confidence that they could say, actually, do you know what? I'm putting her to bat and I'm putting her to bowl number 4 or number 5. So decision-making skills is a big one. Actually, when you pick up a ball, do I throw it to a bowler's end or do I throw it to a keeper's end? Which one? It's training their brain to decide. So decision-making skills are handy for anything. Social cohesion. Cricket's very much a team-orientated sport, so it's about being able to negotiate in a team with others as well. Being respectful is one, and another one I like to advocate with my girls is that they're also able to stand their ground in life in general. And I hope I don't bore anyone when I talk about cricket here, but I'm not sure if anyone knows what the Mankad rule is, but the Mankad rule is that if a batter's in the crease and they walk out before a bowler can actually stop and get them out. And sometimes I warn some of my girls, actually, if you're bowling and the batter, this actually considered cheating. If they do come out their crease, complain to the umpire or just speak to the umpire and be respectful about it and say, listen, they've stepped out of line. Do you mind having a word? But then what I've generally said is, if they carry on doing it, if you've politely told the umpire and then umpire has had a word, by the second time, if they do it again, knock the bails off. And I've often had parents asking me, why are you coaching this? Why are you advocating that? And I've sort of said, it's because I want the girls to stand their ground, that in life, be respectful and play fair. But if someone does take advantage over you, that's when you can't accept it and you have to act. So I guess it's giving the girls that confidence that actually they can't be walked all over as well, really. So really kind of being able to stand their ground. And then leadership skills as well. Like I said, I rotate my captains. There is not one girl that's a captain every single week. I want all of them to take on that leadership responsibility, because they can apply that in any walk of life, whether it's in sport or whether that's in university or school, anywhere or any job. So yeah, lots of different skills that people can actually take away, and that's not just cricket. I think you can do that in sport generically. But those are the examples I can give you from a cricket perspective.
No, Sangy, that's amazing. And I really love the fact that you give everyone a chance, all the girls a chance, and rotate those roles. Because you're so right. I think as women, as young girls, we probably, once that we overthink. And, sometimes it is hard to make decisions, sort of like on the spot. And this is training, isn't it? So life skills training, health, it's all in one. So brilliant, all good. Right. Finally, what would your message be to the audience, to girls, who want to sort of like take up the sport, and maybe they've got issues, I don't know, body image, and with South Asian girls, maybe like cultural issues as well. What would your message be to them?
Interesting, because when we talk about diversity, we often always question other organizations, are they diverse enough? But sometimes we don't look within our own self and say, are we diverse enough in our way of thinking? It's like food, and I can say this being in a Sri Lankan household, between my dad and my husband, they always want to eat Sri Lankan food all the time. And I say, stop a minute, do you know what? I want to have a bit of Italian or a little bit of French, or do something different. And again, with music, do we all always listen to the same? I'm referring, Abid, obviously, because I'm very conscious that this is very art driven. But with my taste of music, I listen to lots of different genres of music. But again, the same thing, when people approach, for example, a cricket club, are you approaching them thinking, I must go in there if there's lots of South Asians there only? I'd probably say is one of the takeaways I probably want you to take away is just open your mind a little bit, because there is nothing, even I run my own cricket club, but there is nothing that says you are not welcome here. It's how you feel. So I'd probably say if you wanted to take up a sport and there's a local cricket club, have a go, just turn up and see how you feel. However, if you do feel that it's not right for you, or the environment just isn't, then I guess that's where our program fits in slightly differently. Because, okay, if you don't want to go to the local cricket club where you are, then at least take it to your community. And this is where what we're doing at work is to try and bring cricket into local communities where people feel comfortable to play, even if they don't want to go to a cricket club. For example, we've put programs in temples, mosques, gurdwaras, leisure centres everywhere. So I'd probably say open, just be open to going and having a different experience. And I'd like probably give myself a bit of self-criticism here. I run Women and Girls at Harrow Cricket Club, and we I'd probably say we're about 85% South Asian, if not more, 90 maybe. And there's nothing in there saying that, for example, white people are not welcome, or and there is something that I feel deeply uncomfortable with at the moment, if I'm honest with you, because while I've been a role model and I've encouraged lots of South Asian females to come through and play the game, I'm very conscious that I don't have one single Black girl. And that's not because we say Black people are not welcome. I genuinely believe that you can't be what you can't see. And because we don't have any Black kids playing with us, or even Black coaches, that's why the Black families are not coming through. And again, I don't want to get into this whole, if you want to complete a membership form with us, you need to tick a box and I'll do a filter exercise. I don't want to go down that route either. But I would probably say that it's twofold, isn't it, really? Organizations need to be a little bit more welcoming. So I know our club, we have a piece to do, even if it means proactively going on the media and saying, listen, sorry, we really don't have many Black role models available, but we would like you to get involved. Please do. I'd love to do that piece of work. And it's not that organizations don't want to do it. Sometimes it's time constraints or process. There's lots of things that go on. And I guess it's also down to the individuals, because if a Black family walked down to my club tomorrow, I would welcome them with all arms. So I guess it's twofold, isn't it, really? Making sure the organization is forthcoming, and actually from the other's perspective as well, if they want to walk into a club, just go in and be open to having a new experience.
No, absolutely. This is what we want. We want open and inclusive spaces and inclusive environments for all, really, not just for one community, but everybody. That's what we want to see, diversity. So how important is sports then, Sangy, in achieving holistic well-being, do you think?
Hugely important. Well, physically, I can't talk about myself. I don't feel like I've done any exercise recently, but when I do go back out there with coaching the groups and stuff, I am active. And you obviously your physical benefit, you feel it, don't you? You get your heart circulating, your body's pumped. But I think one of the biggest thing is your mental health, because when you get into this sort of sluggishness of not doing anything physical, and I feel this myself, as soon as I'm going for a run, I may not feel great and my legs, my age is catching up with me, but when I do go for a run and I come back, I feel amazing afterwards. And I think the mental benefits you get more than anything, it's incredible. So from a mental health perspective, I would encourage anyone to do any form of exercise, because it just keeps your mind going. And again, physically, it's just one of the ways we look after our body.
Sangy, it's been so interesting to talk to you. Abid, it's been so interesting to listen to you. Two truly inspiring people we had today. Thank you very much. Sam, I'm going to hand it over to you in case there are any questions, directed towards our lovely panelists.
I'd like to say a big thank you to Sangy as well. Truly, truly inspirational, Sangy. Coming from a mother's point of view, whose daughter is truly into sports as well. And something that you spoke about, that there are a lot of careers out there for girls. And my daughter, she's a 16-year-old, was into sports, cricket and football, thinking of going into physiotherapy. So yes, there is a lot out there, but it just needs to be invested and looked into. And it's only today that I found out that there's I think a local coaching team called Saltley Survivors here in Birmingham. So I'm thinking of enrolling my daughter into that team as well, which is 16 plus. And along with that, there's a lot of other teams out there. So, parents with daughters out there, get them out there, get them active, get them enrolled to as many of these teams as possible, really. So thank you, Sangy, and thank you, Abid, again, for such inspirational talk for all of us in the audience and the participants. I think at the end, I'd just like to leave you all with a rhetorical question, since we are talking about South Asian Heritage Month. And actually, we might have a quick browse through the chat box before we go. So yeah, there was a question on the chat box, which has already been answered and addressed by Sangy, to do with how coaching can be done for the parents and parents who have faced some sort of racism when they were playing cricket in their time. So I think that has already been addressed. So yeah, I'd like to leave you all with a rhetorical question of what does heritage mean to you all? So think about that as in the audience. And again, thank you so much to all the audience, to all the panelists, facilitators, and the guest speakers for joining in today. Thank you. Have a lovely day. Keep each other in your prayers. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Lovely to have met you. Take care. Bye.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Bye then. Best of luck.